himself. Cody runs Cody L, and actually most recently Cody L, and it's Mode Effect. Is that right?
Yeah.
Mode Effect. And he has been in the WordPress space for as long as I have, as long as I remember, has presented at several different WordCamps, and is kind of one of those WordCampers who just goes around and has a lot of connections and knows a lot of people in the WordPress community. And his focus is a lot on user interface and design. So we're going to go ahead and hand it on over to Cody.
Dead silence.
Woo!
So is typically they always stand here, or are they on the stage proper?
Right there's a good spot.
Right
Okay.
there's a good spot, just so you don't block those slides.
Yeah, good idea. Okay, so I can see these. All right. Is everybody ready to party or what? Okay, so you're probably wondering who's this weird guy standing behind Carol. Cody Landefeld is my name, and I'm the founder of Mode Effect. And so I've done some talks at WordCamps, and it's been a little while, and something that's been on my mind is, user interface. As I look at my technical skill set, I'm not, an advanced developer. In fact, at one point, I was a hack developer. I was just telling Joe over here that I used to do action scripts. So does anyone remember what action script was? Anyhow, I used to do that. So anyhow, I want to talk about some things related to user interface, and the title of the talk is Obvious UI. Does that sound like anything? I got it from a Paul Simon song. It's Obvious Child. There's the Obvious UI. So I thought that was very clever. I was very thankful that I'm so clever. So anyway, so let's get right to it. So kind of before we crash in, I think just getting a feel for the room, I think, and forgive me, I haven't been able to participate in this group as much as I'd like to, but I know, a lot of the people in this group, I assume, are working on developing, right? Do we have a group of developers mostly? If you want to raise your hand, if you consider yourself a developer. Yeah?
Qualified developer.
So somebody who's more focused on the code than the design.
Okay.
So, yeah, and I think what I tend to understand, having worked with some of the developers and having worked in our company, we understand that isn't a native skill set for every developer. Not every developer is creative. Many are, but it doesn't come naturally all the time. So one of the key differences in creating really great web experiences, especially now, is user interface. So as we look at user interface, and as we get to define it and kind of dig into it, one of the best ways to kind of dig into it is figuring out what user interface isn't. So I think the challenge that we get a little bit confused on, a little confusing, is especially for self-taught, we're teaching ourselves how to make websites and whatnot. It's easy to get user experience and user interface confused. So we need to understand the real difference so that we're, if we're self-taught and we're teaching ourselves what we should be doing, we're kind of heading down the right path. So basically this description is pretty straightforward, pretty basic. And I looked up an article to find a decent creative explanation on what UI and UX is. It says UI is the saddle, the stirrups, and the reins. UX is the feeling you get being able to ride the horse and rope your cattle. So, because I'm a cowboy, that just made total sense to me. So, I don't know about you guys, but that, that was right here. You guys with me?
Yeah.
Good. So everybody's so quiet. We're all focused on learning. That's good. Anyhow, so any thoughts or questions so far? Like, I want, when I speak, when I present a topic, I definitely want to make sure that, there's some interaction. I know Carol was saying that we don't want to interrupt, but, I definitely do welcome any comments as we go forward. So again, just kind of understanding that key difference about specifically what user interface is. Now, I saw this image. You guys may have seen this image before. The difference on what user interfaces, or rather design, or user experience. So noting the key difference here. So I think it's important. Hopefully most of us know this in this room, and if you don't, there's no shame in that. But it's important for us to understand, because if we are doing any client work, or we're working on providing solutions for people, we need to understand the right order of things. So here's kind of a look into the ecosphere of what goes on with professional web services. We got, does this have one of these laser? Does this have one?
Top, it's green.
A green laser?
Oh,
So, obviously you've got user and experience design that encompasses everything. And you see all of these things that kind of interconnect within the process of providing professional web services. And at first glance, this can look confusing, or this can look a little bit challenging from our understanding of what we're best, comfortable with, or what we're most gifted to do. But it's definitely something that we should all understand that plays a part in creating great web experiences. So, again, this is a really good graph that I borrowed from another article that I thought, kind of gave a wide breadth of what's all involved with user inner experience. I got this really cool cold, so I can have a really cool voice for this presentation, by the way. So you're welcome for that. I'm going for the laughs tonight, guys. All right, let's keep moving on. All right. So something that's probably obvious and maybe not so obvious is we understand user interface isn't always design. Whether you're taking a website and completely going from the ground up and designing everything custom or whatnot, or you're starting with maybe a base theme or something like that. It's not always about just having to go and design. Sometimes it's about leveraging what's already there. I know that oftentimes we understand, as we not only make things for the web, we also look at the web a lot, and we know that there's a lot of poor examples of that. So I think it's a curse and a blessing being somebody who works on user interface or is kind of focused on that so much, because I am the most impatient person on a website. I mean, if you have a little bit of time to win me over, if I don't have to be on that website, it's poorly executed, I'm out of it. You guys with me?
Yeah.
Is everybody with me?
Yeah.
So we understand that it isn't always executed well, but again, it doesn't always have to be designed. And here's kind of an example of maybe a poor example. How many of you guys have to use this website or something, or a website similar to that? How about you, Chris? Have you been on this website?
I would want to.
I know, right? So, I mean, this was a screenshot from today. Nobody built this in this room, did they? Like, just want to make sure. Somebody's like sinking down in their chair right now.
I feel so ADD right now.
Yeah, it's okay. So we're like forced to use this. So let me take a step back. Talk about poorly executed user interface on a website, design and whatnot. And yeah, for your blog that you read on your off time, on a Saturday in a hammock or whatever. But this is like something that people and businesses and all types of entities have to use. It's god awful. So we're very familiar with bad things. It's like, can't pay your taxes? Well, I certainly can't do it on this website because it's terrible. So you're just rubbing it in, aren't you? All right. I digress. So, I don't want to get too broad here because we're largely talking about the web and whatnot. But I have a refrigerator that has a screen on it, and I think it's forked from an Android operating system. And I really want to tear into Android users tonight because that's why I came here. No, I'm just kidding. That's not true. But no, I was actually using this. Like somebody had asked me to turn on a song on Pandora on my fridge, and it took me like 16 clicks to get a song going. And I'm like, wow, this is just so poorly designed. And guess what? I can't update the user interface or the operating system. So of course, this extends past the web. We have a lot of challenges with the things that we use. I mean, even brand new products that are shipping and available now, that are available now, we understand that there's a lot of frustrating user interface examples. Does anybody want to bring one up that maybe I haven't thought of or mentioned or something? What's off the top of your mind of really terrible user
I can give you a
interface?
really basic one. Where was their brain when they put the turn the power off button on the start menu?
You mean on Windows?
Yeah, like that was just the most not intuitive thing
Turn it
ever.
off, you have to press stop.
Yeah, I dislike it so much that I neglected to buy it. Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely.
So on Facebook, as your feed loads, there's like about a half second when it loads and there's a story that you see, and then as new stuff populates, it goes and you lose that story, and you're like, and you like start trying to find that story because it's gone and it's way down in your feed and you have to go back and look for it. Am I the only one that sees that?
Yeah.
Preach.
Oh,
Or it just disappears from your feed.
yeah. Well, that's the
Like if you click off of it and go back to the feed.
Oh yeah, yeah. Joe Man.
So in the new Fords, they have sync. You have to manually click on to set up Bluetooth to connect every time. Whereas other cars, like the Prius, it sees your Bluetooth and automatically connects it every time. You don't have to authenticate it every time. You just have to hit connect.
Yeah, car UI
Yeah.
is the worst.
Yep.
There's like a whole separate talk somebody's making about car UI. In fact, Tin and Lax, I think T-Hin and Lax did a whole blog on bad car UI. You probably want to Google it. I don't know if the website's still up. They shut down or they merged with Google or Facebook. But they did a whole article on bad car UI. That's just god awful. Yeah.
This is maybe a silly one. I would just love if someone could tell me, you see toilets now with 2 buttons on them on the top,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Amount of water or not. I don't know if the big button means a lot of water,
Yeah.
or if it means use this one more commonly because it's not a lot of water. Does anyone know? I haven't sat and pushed either one to find out.
I always feel like a jerk too, like somebody's gonna yell at me like I hit the wrong
Like you
button.
ate the earth.
Yeah. I'm obviously like trying to use a lot of water here, like a wasteful person. Anything else? We're tormented as web designers, right? I mean, we just can't enjoy life, right? Whereas if the other way around, somebody's trying to play a cruel joke on us by making really terrible websites. It could be the other way. It probably is the other way, right?
It's a reflection of the brain that creates it.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
And I would not like to live inside of most of them.
Especially those toilets.
The menu system on my Amazon Fire Stick.
Oh yeah.
It takes forever to find what you want. Watch.
I know, it's like, it's a gorgeous, it's a beautiful time we live in that we have so many things that have user interfaces, and we can watch Netflix on our refrigerator and our microwave and whatnot, but gotta catch up with the good UI. You know, it's just gotta get better.
I'll tell you one thing I found recently, if I can just say, because you're asking about this.
Yeah.
I just spent the last month looking at newsletter platforms
Okay.
for email, bulk email. The big guys, Constant Contact, Get Response, all the big guys, they all suck.
Yeah.
Okay, they're too expensive and they don't do what they need to do. I found one recently that is called, now I don't remember the name of it, but now that I'm using it, it's like the easiest thing. And it's like I had to go outside of what everybody says is the best one to use and look for something deeper.
Yeah.
To find something that actually worked.
That'll happen. I make a lot of decisions on, like, Notifact, our company, we use a lot of software as a service platforms for different things, and I'm horrible. Like, I'll cancel something, or I just won't sign up for something if the design is terrible or whatnot, if it makes no sense. I'm the toughest judge. Let's go to move on. I mean, we could have a gripe session all day about this. We're just getting started on it, so let's go to move on. So, talked about what user interface isn't. Talked about what user experience is a little bit. What's the actual definition of user interface? And really, it's it's about coming together with an experience on a machine with the machines and people. So it's like, you know, more harmonious event than Terminator. You know, like instead of Skynet trying to kill you, it's harmony. So it's a good experience. That joke killed in another meetup. I was really trying to make it work. So, you know, again, that's kind of the definition on, you know, what's really supposed to happen, what is it all supposed to do. So one of the things that I always think about, and we're constantly thinking about in Motifect, like, you know, how do we make this easier for the user? And I think about that old commercial with the owl. How many licks does it take to get to the center of the Tootsie Pop? How many clicks does it take to get to the destination, man? Especially on that easy revenue website, or especially on the Kindle Fire, or whatever, the Amazon Fire thing. I mean, good Lord, we're like, they just want, these companies just want us to click forever, apparently. But anyhow, very aware of like how much the user has to click. And again, that's kind of, you know, moving into user experience territory. But, you know, the design, the interface aspect of this really has to do with the UI. One of the things I think that we get a little challenged on if we are self-taught, or, you know, maybe design is not our strong suit, is that buttons start to look a little confusing to a user. And that will become more challenging depending on how comfortable the user is with the website, or, you know, technology in general. Right now we're working on a couple websites, and we always have this joke, and when we're working on stuff, it's like, I don't see why this company wanted to redesign their website, you know, like if it's an obvious joke, and I'm a really funny guy and everybody laughs at that joke because, you know, everybody loves me in Motifect, right, Joe? I'm just kidding. But I just, you know, well, because obviously I'm pointing at the fact that the user interface is so poor. I guess I'd feel a little more insecure if it was like a really great looking website. Like, why are they having us do that? But no, I think this is a really key thing. It's a simple thing, but I think a lot of times, a lot of people that aren't, you know, in depth in this process, they can get this wrong. So buttons should look like buttons. I need to read this. You know, I think, you know, again, this is kind of moving into the user experience side a little bit, but, you know, does the user know what happens next? What should happen next? Is there something intuitively going on? Is there something subconscious that a user should know about? I mean, this is really important. And this is my biggest complaint. Why do I have to register? Why do I have to do things that I don't want to do on a website just to do one thing? Can I get an amen in here?
Yes.
Amen. All right. See, we're very tormented as web designers, and it's like, I just have the worst attitude. That could ruin my day. If I have to register for this thing and sign in and whatever, it's just a nightmare. So we have a
Just
responsibility.
to see whether or not I want to be there.
Oh yeah, yeah. We have a responsibility to make this better. So when you're creating websites for people, do this better. All right. So we're kind of being silly. We're kind of thinking about preferences. Yes, I need to spend 5 extra minutes on a website. Yeah, that's not so great. Or I can't get to watching Friends on Netflix, you know, as quickly as I want on, you know, on the backside of my shower or wherever, you know, they have Netflix on now. But kind of thinking bigger, like, it's kind of a joke in thinking about it, but it's actually pretty serious. Like, what would happen if user interface contributed to like something awful happening, a tragedy? And no joke, I looked up an article today and I found this out. And there was a list of 6 things that happened as a consequence of bad user interface. And number 4, there was a flight that crashed because the screen was too small, and the things that were on the screen that were causing them to set up how they were supposed to set up autopilot were just designed way too small. You'd think this would have been tested. You'd think that the pilots would have paid attention, but again, bad user interface actually kills people. So your job is very important. This flight is not a joke, but our thing is serious. So that was kind of trying to be funny, but maybe it wasn't. I don't know. But no, seriously, I mean, yeah, it's kind of tongue in cheek. It's kind of silly, but seriously, I mean, you know, we need to think about this because when we translate that intention over to a business, let's say we're working on an e-commerce website, we're working on something that's directly tied to some type of revenue model. I mean, seconds, load time, things that happen on the user's journey can really impact the bottom line of a company. And we need to pay attention to these details. And again, it's a challenge if this is not directly the thing that you're, really focused on. So it's just important to know these basics. But again, going to the top of the worst thing that can happen, people can die from bad user interface. So be aware of that. Probably not on a computer though, unless well, I guess if you were looking at your phone, it's a bad user interface, somebody could probably be looking at their phone and wreck their car because you designed a poor looking website. It's actually just terrible. So not a good thing at all.
Cody, there's a real life example of that, and if you go to the Arizona Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and as soon as you click into their site, it's been a while since I've been there, there's a banner up at the top that says, you can click back out of this right now and it will not store any cookies if you are not on a safe computer. And so what they're thinking about is people who are in abusive relationships and they have a controlling person who's looking at the history on their computer. And so they have this thing that says, click here now within the next 30 seconds or whatever. And this browser will not cache this. And go somewhere else to a safer computer that's not shared to seek help or call here.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
That's a good example of UI saving a life, of potentially saving a life.
Absolutely. And what was it, the Domino's, did you see the Domino's thing where they ordered pizza online and they had like a comment section that said, call 911 or something?
Yep.
Good
Yep.
UI. Or is Pizza Hut? Okay, so Domino's is the one that you could order pizza on Twitter now, right? I was seeing that. I think that's real. That's coming. It's just too lazy to pick up my
Pick up the
phone.
emoji and just tweet it.
Yeah, I know. Twitter. Pizza Twitter.
It's emoji. It's emoji with thumbs up.
She's like, so we're not balanced as a society, people. We the importance of ordering a pizza on Twitter, and then we can't even do my taxes or file my taxes on a website. It's crazy. All right. So moving back to the web, not on a refrigerator, not on a airplane cockpit, not on a whatever ridiculous thing that they could put an interface on. Why is UI important for the web? Going back to kind of looking at that tax site, we're to the point in society, 2015, there's a lot of things we have to do on the web. I mean, whole, organizations are replacing jobs with technology, and that's kind of good and bad at the same time. Bad if that was your job, sorry. But I mean, if there's a lot of things we have to do using the web, using technology, and it really sucks when things just do not work the way that they should. So, that's why it's so important. I think that I want to be empathetic to everybody in this room. I did not carry a degree for web design. I did not graduate from the School of Web Design or from the University of Web Design. I'm self-taught. I'm an amateur, and I include myself in this. But if we are self-taught and we don't know these things, I think that too often we get ourselves too far into making things that can confuse users. And I'm not saying that we're here to shame people in that may accidentally do that or whatnot. But it's important to be aware or be open to hearing things that we can improve with our process. And that includes me most of all. Because as the web grows, there's things that continue to get improved and changed all the time. So as we kind of move into some of the final thoughts on obvious UI, getting on special types of experiences like colorblind users. Like I think, we may not really face this as a requirement from our clients all the time, but it's something to really think about as we consider who potentially would be using this website or the website that we're creating. What about a user that, you know, has limited eyesight, that they're still using a screen, or they need to have some type of audio associated with it. You know, we need to think about accessibility things that are related to the user interface as well. And it's not in every instance, but we need to have that kind of on our radar, depending on what the website is intended to be used for. So this is definitely a harsh example of, well, this looks, this gets the point across really good.
Yeah.
It looks better on my screen.
You can barely read that.
I know. So can you imagine if you couldn't determine these shades of the purple and the red? I mean, you can't even read that. I mean, you know, when we see these websites that have, you know, not a lot of web text, and there's dark colors on top of a light color, or light color on top of dark color, and it's badly matched, it gets to be really painful experience. And I'm sure none of us are guilty of this in the room, but, you know, again, these are things we need to think about. For people with accessibility, people with colorblind issues, you know, we're talking about the shade can make all the difference on your button, on what to do. You know, as you can see, that this is harder to see. This slide, the brightness on the slide really isn't doing it justice, but I promise you that this looks good. And you can notice, you know, you got a darker outline here and somewhat of a shaded outline, and then you have white outline, so it's a little easier to see. But again, I mean, we just need to be aware of those little tweaks and those little differences and details that really will make it all the more easy to use for a user. Yes, sir.
Is this why, and I'm coming from development side, is this why the ghost buttons have become so popular? The ghost buttons are the ones with just, it's like a transparent center with a border, and then on hover, they completely fill with a color. I mean, is that going to fall into the best category? I mean, it's a drastic change. Is that?
I don't know.
Like a user response change.
Yeah, like when you hover. I mean, these are good versus hover, and in those ones, it's such a, like you're changing the color and the border on here. But I think like the ghost ones completely change the background from transparent to a color. I don't know.
I think you're on the right track, but if they don't hover, then they might miss it.
Well, they could miss all of them if they don't hover.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious if that, you know anything about
Makes
that
sense.
shit, because they become very popular.
Yeah, well, I mean, I feel like we're using those a lot. Like, I don't, my term is probably not the same, the ghost button. When you said ghost button, I thought you were going to say Ghostbuster.
Oh, sorry, I got you all excited.
I know. I was like, oh, okay. No, I mean, I think I know what you understand. I think I understand what you're talking about. And I think it's a challenge always, because, you know, that's personally, as a designer, as somebody who wants to utilize, you know, a more efficient trend. Like, I know a lot of things are going with the ghost style. You know, we've done a fair amount of sites with that ghost button, but I do always wonder about the user who's a little bit more less comfortable with technology, because there's always that consideration of like, yeah, it's not going to be as cool, it doesn't look as good, but, you know, it's tough. And it's a challenge too, because honestly, like, a lot of these buttons and like really big buttons, like, they just don't look great. But if that's what the intended audience needs, you know, that's tough. So to go back and answer your question, I think that, you know, trends in web design, especially on design specifically, it's always, I think there's always that kind of, that refining step, like a 1.1 version or a, you know, 1.2 version that kind of gets it more right than the first one. And I know what you're talking about with the ghost buttons. I know what a ghost button is. But I always do kind of find myself wondering, like, if it's the most effective thing. Yeah, I mean, it's a challenge, but I know it will continue to get refined and get better as it goes, you know what I mean? So that's a good point.
I wonder sometimes about some of the target audiences for some websites, like for example, like a design person's website might be really cool looking, but it might not be very functional. So if you're a business person that's looking for some design help, but but maybe you're not in that generation.
Yeah.
So maybe like the font size is too small, or it's like, you know, like the grayscale on white drives me nuts. I can't see it.
Yeah.
But just different things like that, like thinking about the target audience. Yeah, you're a design firm and you want to look cool, but if your target audience is like not going to be able to
Yeah.
react or use your website because it's so cool that it's not functional,
Oh, yeah.
then it's
yeah.
like, I don't know, that
I
doesn't
know.
really make sense.
That's a
That's
tough
just,
thing.
that might be a poor example.
Well, yeah, and it's a tough thing as a designer because you really want to be doing work that you're proud of, that you want to show off. I mean, we just, case in point, we just did not too long ago, did a website for a funeral home, and the funeral home owner was really funny because he's like, these people are going to have cataracts in their eyes, and he had a country accent and everything. He's great client, but it was just funny because like he's all, I don't want any like background patterns or anything because they're not going to be able to see that with cataracts in their eyes. And,
That's
you know,
true.
It's- it
the
really
audience-
is true.
No, it's a good point because, you know, I was like, you know what, like, yeah, we want to create a great design for this website, but ultimately it's got to serve its audience.
Yeah.
And yeah.
You know, you guys are like mostly independents here, but I'm dealing with exactly that issue with a big hosting company called HostMonster. They changed their interface on the back end for their cPanel. It is now this hideous dark charcoal gray with that weird color green. It seems to be so popular right now, but they're using yellow text on top of that. You can't see it. It's depressing to be in the environment to have to use it.
Yeah.
And I just sent them a big feedback because I have to leave. I can't stay there.
Wow.
It's not a business user. It's like I'm wondering, well, who is their target market that they let some 20-something, excuse me if there's anybody that young, design it and it looks cool,
No offense taken.
but the user is, you know, I gotta leave. I've been
Oh,
there
yeah.
7 years and I gotta leave because they made a bad choice that they didn't think about who it was gonna affect, their
Yeah.
own customers.
Details matter, absolutely. Your audience matters, and you know.
Well, that also goes into that whole idea. I think this was mentioned on something the other day, Carol, on the Facebook page.
Yes.
About, you know, that the developer and the business person not being able to communicate and understand each other's language and ideas.
Yeah.
And even sometimes the middle person gets, you know, like is not able to get one side or the other or translate for the one side or the other.
Yeah, I mean that's a whole other challenge on its own too. I mean, I think coming from two different worlds, it's important we understand these basics. Even if we're not going to go leave this meetup and start designing websites, you know, from scratch, or you know, go in a deep dive into design. It's just important to know kind of what to look out for. So, absolutely. How are we doing on time? We need to keep moving.
7 more minutes.
Okay. So how can I create a good user interface? I think I know, I kind of thought of it as a joke, but seriously, I mean, yeah, I mean, I think the time that you're going to take, if you're creating websites for people and you're going to take the time to try to do design yourself, it may be more affordable to just find a freelance designer and say, you know what, can you design the interface for this website? Even if it's taking a theme and kind of customizing it to brand, that could really save you a lot of investment, a lot of stress and frustration. I'm sure you've already thought of that, but you know, it's kind of the simplest answer. You know, I think if we're in that mode of kind of doing it ourselves and kind of learning on our own, you know, I think the WordPress ecosystem, themes, it's like the Wild West out there. You go to Theme Forest, which happens to be the most popular theme store out there, and you know, you just don't know how good a quality these are. So I personally will, you know, go back to WordPress.com because they do a fantastic job of just making sure the themes are just, you know, well executed and done very well. It's very hard to get a theme onto WordPress.com, so you can pretty much trust their opinion. And again, you know, we're coming to this meetup because we know that we don't have everything figured out. We're continuing to want to learn. So, you know, the more we reach out and ask for help, the better. And that's just like me. I mean, I'm not all things to web design. You know, I don't carry a degree from the most prestigious web design college, if that's a thing. It's probably not a thing.
University of Phoenix.
University of Phoenix. Phoenix. I'm not, but that's something that we need to continue to reach out for help. So, kind of recapping what we've talked about, looking at user interface. It's not always just about design. They say it can be a science or a craft about user interface design. It's not always just straight out design and images and typography and all that fun stuff. It's there's really a lot involved to it, a lot of thinking, knowing how those paths intersect with user experience and user interface. It's not always about design. We looked at the definition of user interface. I know we kind of assume that. I know we kind of intuitively know that, but it's important to kind of remind ourselves of what that is. And then, why is it specifically important for the web? So, looking at why that's super important for the web is key. And, we kind of touched on this briefly, but how do we create good user interface? That's important for us to know. How do we achieve that? So, that was interesting. Yeah, I tricked you there. So, once again, my name is Cody Landefeld, and I'm founder of Motorfact, and this is a couple of guys I work with. This is at the Gangplank in Avenue, actually. This old picture. We need to update these. But yeah, if you guys got any questions or want to follow me on Twitter, I'm at Cody L. Yeah, it's a cheap way to get followers, always. And you can find us at motorfact.com. So thanks, guys, for listening. And I don't know if I have any time for questions or whatnot.
Sure. A couple questions.
Yeah.
So how would you go about requesting that somebody do something about their user interface? For example, my biggest pet peeve is online job applications because they don't ever accommodate foreign addresses. And since I've worked overseas, I can never complete a job application. It's madness.
Yeah.
So who would I go to say, hey, can you fix this so I can apply for a job here? They're all bad like that, yeah.
Yeah, I know that form inputs are just terrible. Ultimately.
Actually, I have an answer for that.
Great.
Feedback for the situation I was dealing with. I asked them, how do I get to management? Who made that terrible management decision to okay that designer to make that change? And they gave me an email to complain to. Now, whether or not I'm going to get any results, who knows? But at least they'll know why I left.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. This is a job application process. I can never. That's what I'm saying. I can never apply for a job ever.
So go to the website and ask for their feedback.
But most of those are just tax products that they plug in and need, so they're not.
Yeah, they're usually the place that you're applying for is borrowing this interface from
somebody else.
Oh yeah, like a ZipRecruiter or something.
Yeah, NeoGov is for every city in
What
the
is it?
country uses NeoGov. Every city
Anything
in the
with
country
gov
uses.
probably is in trouble.
I think you started on a good point though, that form UI is just, it's, as a developer it's bad, as a designer it's bad, but it's just not always easy either.
Oh yeah, that's
It's not
the
always
key.
easy to create.
To be a developer who has to
I
know
can
what's
imagine.
coming in, and I think that's an area where we could probably be the best as a community.
They're
is
just bad.
to improve the process of forms. I know there's HTML5 is going to help that, but we're kind of still waiting.
I think that what's going to be best, we didn't really touch on this in the talk, but interaction on forums. I think that there's so many forums that are just kind of stay static. I think that it should have some way to sense more text is coming. You know what I mean? To save space at first, but also expand with okay, you're going to a new line. Let's expand.
Yeah, and applying for grants. When I was doing that, sometimes I didn't know that there was a character or space limit. Whereas if that was just right up front, or when you have a teeny tiny little box and you can only see 2 lines at a time, the ones that have the expandable text box is great, but the ones that don't are incredibly frustrating.
Yeah, forget about it.
When you first get a job for a client, what are the initial questions you ask yourself or you ask the client to try to get to good user interface?
I think it's more about knowing their business, and we can kind of pick up on how to achieve solving those business challenges with user interface. So I don't expect the client to know how it affects user interface. It's pretty telling. Not only by looking at their website, but hearing more about some of their challenges in a redesign. So, I mean, I always welcome that feedback if a client wants to be more hands-on or has a better, breadth of experience. But likely, it's up to us to kind of decode those challenges.
So, I mean, what questions do you ask yourself, I guess? You know what? Like if I'm trying to create good user interface on my website, what would I ask myself to get there?
Have someone else use your website and you watch them over their shoulder.
What if you don't have a website?
The user is drunk.
Say anything.
The user is drunk.com.
Oh, is that guy who does like $500?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
there you go.
My mom is the user.com.
Yeah,
She does both
yeah,
those
there you go.
websites. You'll get drunk. It's what is it? 500? Is it 500 bucks?
No, it's only
Yeah.
500.
Yeah, he'll get drunk and he'll use your website and he'll write notes about it.
Really? It's a real thing.
He's a UI UX expert.
Yeah.
But
But
definitely the user thing. That's a good idea.
yeah, but on a serious note, like if you're kind of small team or you're just by yourself, I mean, I think it's all about creating as few obstacles as possible. How many clicks does it take? I still got that on my mind. How many clicks? With a C. You missed it. I said because one of mine was how many clicks does it take to get to the destination? It's like how many clicks. All right, but think about that. Put yourself in the user's shoes. I don't want to register. I don't want to have to do 16 clicks to get to where I got to go. So the more empathetic you can be, the better on that. That's more thinking in terms of user experience.
Is there a centralized place that you go to learn more about user interface standards?
Not really. I'll dig around with some blogs
Right.
and just find articles that are talking to specific challenges that we're having. But not really. I think accessibility is probably the worst or the hardest thing to do because there's just not a lot of great stuff out for usability or accessibility. But
What was
the
your
answer
question,
question
Doug?
before?
Oh, if there's a centralized place for usability standards.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Stuff like that.
Yeah, unfortunately, no. I mean, there probably is something that's attempting to do that. Not the one that I go to all the time. How are we doing?
Thank
On the tick?
Yes.
All right.
Good.
All right. So, we're going to have Dallin Harris talk to us. Dallin is an awesome guy. I got to know Dallin whenever we were working on WordCamp 2012. We had many great long meetings and lots of hard work that ended up in a wonderful event and a good friendship. Dallin's just a great guy, founded Skyhook Internet Marketing. I'll let him tell you a little bit more about where his expertise lies, and he's going to talk to us today about managing the interactive development process.
Fabulous, thank you. Put that in there. Let's see. You guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Wonderful. I am delighted to be with you. Thank you so much for that introduction, Carol. And I'm delighted and a little bit humbled. I know there's some really great developers here in the room, really great, guys who have like Jen, who has software experience, like Todd, like Joe over here, Carol. I mean, I'm humbled to be with you, and kind of like Cody said before me, I'm happy to have this interactive. If anyone has anything they want to chip in, anything that they've learned, love to make this a group collaboration. And I want to give a shout out to Cody and Raquel. I mean, these guys do so much for this community, and that was an awesome presentation, Cody. So thank you very much for getting us started today. I've chosen to title my presentation "Building on WordPress Without Percocet." I've just a little bit of quick background on me. Like Carol said, my name is Dallin Harris. This is my team. We're at Skyhook Interactive, a high-performance WordPress development shop in the East Valley. And we've been building websites since 2008. We've built over 500 now, which is cool. And we're having a lot of fun. We've had the privilege of working with some pretty cool clients. Most recently, we did the Arizona Super Bowl website on WordPress, which we're pretty proud of. But we've done everything from mom and pop shops to dentist office to law firms to you name it. And we're growing quickly. Our goal is to be at 10 million in revenue by 2020. And it's a big goal, but it's an exciting space to work in. We have this kind of modest space out in the East Valley for now. I'm going to give you my number. This number represents the amount of money that I have lost while not knowing what I was doing while trying to develop websites. So if I look at all the years that we've been in business and all of the things we should have charged or what we should have made and subtract that from what we actually made, this is our number. And I put it up there as a painful reminder to myself, A, that I don't know everything, and just so you guys can understand kind of the quantity of mistakes that I have made that have brought me to this point. And what I hope to do tonight is to share a little bit of insight with you about how to manage the interactive development process so that you don't make those mistakes yourself. Just to put this number in a little bit of perspective, that would be 6 brand new BMWs for that amount of money, 35 Hawaiian vacations. I'm into drones. I could have bought 354 drones worth $177,000. I could have purchased 750,000 followers on Twitter. Or my personal favorite, I could have spent 4.5 years at Disneyland every single day with that amount of money. And before I jump in, I want to say this to all of you. Well, actually, let me get a show of hands. How many of you build on WordPress for other people? You get paid to do it. Okay, and how many of you do it yourself for your own cause or you're kind of a user? Okay, good. So we probably have some of both. So I'm gonna try to speak to both of those audiences a little bit here. But first, I want to say something to everyone in this room. This is something I think a lot about at Skyhook. The internet is got to be the most exciting thing ever invented. Am I right? I mean, it is incredible, and it blows my mind every day to see these new things that are coming out, these new inventions, these new ways that the internet is revolutionizing this planet. I mean, I think one of the things that's so exciting about what we're doing is we are literally building the fabric of the internet. We are making it better. We will tell our kids and our grandkids how we were there. We were there when it got started, and we were figuring all this user interface stuff out for the first time, and we were figuring out this open source software thing for the first time, and it's just incredible the huge multiplier effect that a good website or a good internet presence can have on a business. And to all of you who are the few who are helping to build this, out of all the world, there's very few of us that are literally building the internet. And I feel bad when I see your projects get hung up because of poor execution or because clients didn't understand how hard it is to do this sort of stuff, or when things fail, because we need you. We need you to help build this internet. And if I can offer you any advice tonight that will help you continue to stay in business or continue to get the money that you deserve to do it, I want to do that, because we need every one of you to help build this better internet. So, a couple thoughts. And we're off the page a little bit here. User stories. I would encourage, well, and I'm going to speak from personal experience here. Take it all with a grain of salt. If it doesn't fit for your situation, obviously don't do it. But we have found that it's very important to understand what it is that you're trying to accomplish with the website. Not what could it do, not what could be cool, but literally sit down and ask, okay, I'm thinking of the AZDOR site that Cody brought up. What is it that people come to this site to do? They need to be able to pay their taxes. They probably need to be able to register new businesses, and they probably need to be able to cancel, their transaction privilege license if they go to business. Anything else beyond that is kind of fringe kind of use case, right? And a novice developer, a novice designer might get in and start, oh, it would be really cool if we could add this feature and that feature, and they just kind of get going crazy with all the stuff it could do or that might be cool. But I find that rooting ourselves back in, what is the target? What is it that we're trying to accomplish here? And constantly, we as developers, we're very creative. We're very, we have a lot of ingenuity. We're trying to make it better. Just go back to what is the thing supposed to accomplish in the first place. Write that out. And we found that, for our scoping purposes in writing out to a client what we're going to do, it's all about what do you need to be able to accomplish for it. Well, when I'm uploading payroll, I need to be able to upload a comma separated value file that populates the database. Great. That's a user story. That's a case we can create and work around and not get too crazy building in paths that don't make sense. Eric Ries says that in today's day and age, we have no problem with individual productivity. Okay, we are super productive. We've got our laptops, we've got our smartphones, we've got all these shortcut keys. Like, an individual is very productive. Where we waste time in today's day and age is at the organizational level. We work on the wrong thing. We do it really, really well, and it didn't need to be done at all in the first place. And that's the place to target waste, is at the organizational level, and user stories help us to do that. The next thing that we've learned in developing sites is to do pseudocode. If you're not familiar with that, it's the idea that you write the code, not in actual programming yet. You are whiteboarding, or you are, back of the envelope style, figuring out, okay, how is this going to work? It's going to pull this array from this location, it's going to circle through it, and then it's going to spit them back out in a certain order, right? And going through that process before you actually write the real code, just thinking through each step that it has to go through, super valuable in avoiding, again, those big wastes of time of going down a path that's actually not going to work. Estimating and expectation setting. Again, fairly difficult, because you'll get into these situations where you thought it was going to take an hour or two, and 8 hours later, you're still beating your head against the wall with the same stupid problem. Tell me that has not happened to. Who has that not happened to? I mean, it's hard, and your client gets frustrated, and you get frustrated because you're like, I'm not getting paid anymore for this. It's been hours since I was getting paid for this. But you start to learn some things about yourself. I'd be delighted to hear if anyone here has advice on how to do this. I'll share with you some of the things we've learned about estimating. Number one, breaking it down into the simplest possible tasks. It's really hard to estimate a whole thing, but if we can break it down, and when I'm doing estimating, if I'm seeing a task that's estimated at more than 4 or 5 hours, I'm getting nervous, because that's like too big of a task to wrap my head around. I need to have it in smaller chunks. I also find learning like a multiplier, like, okay, every time I quote this client, I end up off by a factor of 40%. So I'm just gonna take whatever I thought it was gonna be, and I'm gonna up it by 40%. Maybe that'll be right. Same with different team members who work at different paces. And then especially if you're doing agile software development, you learn over time what your actual velocity is. You say, well, we thought we'd get this much done, but we actually only got this much done. So in the future, let's continue at that pace. And then expectation setting. I have this love-hate relationship with one of our developers, because he always tells me like the worst news. Like, it makes it sound like it's going to be so hard, and like it's going to take weeks to get this thing done. And at first I'm like kind of stressed by that, but he always comes back and over delivers. He always gets it done ahead of time. And I think he's just learned that he just sets those expectations nice and low, and then he can delight me. That's common sense, I suppose. Along those lines, we have this mantra at Skyhook of solve the hard problem first. It's so tempting to just, okay, I think I know most of this. I'm just going to jump in and start building pages or adding content and just kind of get this thing moving. We try to do it backwards. We say, what is going to be the hardest part of this whole project? What could derail this whole thing? Let's start there first. Make sure we have a good answer for that, because then the timeline becomes more predictable as the project goes on instead of less predictable. Does that make sense? If you save the hard problem till the end, you're like, oh, I got 2 more days and I'm on the hardest part, but here we go. And then you're in the situation where you're missing the deadline, right? As far as resource management, and what I mean by this is, if you're not doing the work yourself, but you are hiring someone else to do it, man, I could go on forever about this. Jim could probably tell you more than I could about subcontracting out work to other individuals, but a couple of thoughts that I have about it. First of all, compartmentalizable work, if you will. It's really hard to outsource, hey, just jump on this and start helping me out with it. It's much better if you can say, here's a project, it has a defined start and an end, here's my expectations. That helps. Every time we go through an experience with a subcontractor that was a negative experience, we go back and amend our upfront expectations with subcontractors. This is a sheet of paper that we read through with every subcontractor before we start to work together, and we say, okay, We've been burned in the past, so let's be clear. You're going to invoice us at a certain interval. You're going to give us proactive communication updates. You're gonna show us progress along the way, right? Like we're setting all those expectations up front, and I'd be happy to go into more detail on that. But this is a place where you can really lose your shorts if you're not careful. The next one I want to share is this idea of avoiding interruption. You guys seen The Social Network, that movie that came out, right? And I don't know, this is Mark Zuckerberg, or one of the main characters is, don't bother him, he's plugged in, right? He's got his headphones on, and he's like, you know what I'm talking about? This has become, over time, I am more and more a believer of this. We've stopped at Skyhook referring to time. We don't say, or we try really hard not to say, how many hours is this going to take you? How many days is this going to take you? Because time is important, but it's not exactly what you're looking for. Attention is the more important thing. Think about it. If a client calls and gets all upset with you and all angry about something, and it may only have been a 10-minute phone call, but it wrecks your mental capacity for the next 4 hours. It may only have taken 15 minutes, but it really took 4 hours of your productive energy, right? And the same thing happens, you know, me personally, I'm more of a morning guy, so I'm way productive in the morning. My attention, I can get done in the morning in 1 hour what would take me 2 or 3 hours later in the afternoon when I start to drag it. So just strictly measuring time is, we found, not the best language. We like to talk more in terms of the attention. And so what that means when you're in there developing a site is turn off Slack, turn off your chat, you know, eliminate whatever other distractions you can, because we've just found that someone comes and interrupts you when you're in the middle of a code problem. You've got all this in your mind of what variable you're going to use and how this loop is working, and it's all in your RAM, right? And then you turn and answer someone's question, all of that's gone, and 15, 20 minutes later, you're finally getting back up to where you were before the interruption. So you've got to minimize the interruptions, we found. Keep your cool. The problems only get worse when you start to get frustrated with it all. And you start blaming your coworkers, you start blaming the client, and it's really hard to realize that these are emotional kind of problems that you yourself maybe are dealing with. And so we found it very important to stop and say, I'm flooded, I'm stressed by this, I need to just take a step back, step away, because I'm making the problem worse by continuing to try to power through when I'm in this emotional state. It's literally less effective. Stephen R. Covey has this concept of sharpening the saw, right? You're going through the forest and you see these guys cutting away at this tree with a dull saw blade, and they're just cutting, but the thing's not falling over. And you say, why don't you stop and sharpen your saw? And they say, well, we're too busy for that. We don't have to, you know, we got to get this tree down. It's like, no. More productive to stop and sharpen the saw than to keep working at it. Last thing that we've learned is to deliver well. Again, we could go on a whole presentation about when you're actually showing your work to the person that you're supposed to be delivering it to. We've learned to deliver early and often. We find that if we wait until the very end when the whole thing is done and try to show it to them then, and invariably we were way off in a few different areas, and we've now spent lots of time perfecting bad ideas. So we try to show it to them very early. Even in design phase, we're showing them, you know, the top header of a file before we show them the rest of it, or we're showing the first initial interactions. It does a few things. Number one, they can guide you if you're off track to get back on track. Number two, I found that they kind of start to fall in love with it more over time. Like the first time they saw it, they didn't like it that much, but now they've kind of wrapped their head around it, and now they like it more. It's important to explain your rationale behind why you made the design decisions that you did. And even better, bonus points if you can tie it back to their own words, their initial conversation, what it was they said they want. And I remember you said you wanted this, so here's what we delivered for you. Because then you can guide them through your thought process. What you don't want to do, we call this the domino effect at Skyhook, is where if you haven't been watching the project closely enough, or if you haven't been controlling it closely enough, there's a leadership vacuum, and the client feels like they need to fill that. They start stepping in. Now, why didn't you do this? And why did they start trying to take control of it, and it's all just downhill from there. because they start micromanaging the whole process. So you really got to come to that delivery process with confidence, with an explanation of why you did things the way you did. And again, that's hugely valuable in containing project cost. Last thing that we've learned is keep a professional nearby. I am not above at all. In fact, I love anytime that we can subcontract someone who knows a lot more than we do about it. It sounds kind of counterintuitive, but I know that if I hire a guy like Cody to help me out with this project, we may be doing the majority of the work, but he comes in to advise on the harder parts of it. We get to learn from him, and we get to benefit from all of his expertise. So I'm a big fan of that model. Yeah, we might lose a little bit of money on the margin because, you know, it's not our in-house resource or it's not our time, but we gain so much in avoiding mistakes, in learning from people who know more. So that's it. That's it for now. I mean, I wanted to keep it pretty short and simple, and I would love to take any questions that you have.
So when you guys are engaging with somebody else, is that just based on a project request or a challenge you guys see when you engage with them typically? Or bringing somebody in to do that aspect of the project?
So when would we bring in a subcontractor who knows more about it than we do? Yeah, anytime that we're stepping a little bit outside of our existing body of experience. You know, and I'll even say when we're over capacity, it's kind of fun. We did this not too long ago where we have project management in-house, but we were a little over capacity, so we said, let's bring in a really amazing, you know, top dollar project manager that we wouldn't normally be able to afford and just see how they do things. Yeah. So we're looking for opportunities actively to use that kind of learning.
So I love the concept of bringing to light the time versus attention and making sure you're more conscious of the words you're even using. But how does that factor in, you know, obviously, how does it factor into projecting the amount of time you're going to spend? How do you find a balance between
an accompanying comment? So it's like, yeah, that's going to take me 4 hours, but that's going to drain me. That's going to be really hard, intense kind of work. I think we should bill, you know, and another kind of pro tip, we've gotten completely away from hourly rates to our clients. We've tried very hard to train them, like, do not ask us for an hourly rate. We will give you a quote, a fixed fee on anything that you ask. And so what that'll sound like is, man, this is really taxing work. I think I can get it done in 4 hours, but it's gonna totally drain me. Let's bill the client for what would be the equivalent of 6 or 7 hours worth of value because of that, right? And if you haven't set the expectation that it's an hourly rate, then it's not disingenuous. I mean, what I don't want you to take from that is lie to your clients and tell them things take longer than they do.
Yeah, that's more than half a day at that point.
Sure.
Which puts you more at that 7 to 8 hour mark.
Exactly, and it's liberating again because some clients, no matter how much you try to educate them and work with them, they're just we've found, maybe I'm overly sensitive or something, they're just kind of abrasive and it's kind of like a pain and they want everything just like that and it's like difficult to deal with them. And I don't want to say I don't want to deal with you anymore. What I want to say instead is this is the price to deal with this because your requests always come in at the last hour. And, you know, oftentimes they're fine with that. They really are. Great question.
This is not such a great question, just a detail because I'm taking notes. The estimating, you said break it down into the simplest task and then like add, did you say add 40% of your what you thought it might?
Well, so I call that a multiplier. It's like, okay, I really think it's going to take 4 hours, but I know in the past I've been wrong by a factor of 40%, so I'm just going to go ahead and pad it. Or with this particular, you know, we have one developer, bless his heart, super optimistic all the time. I asked him for a quote, he says 8 hours. I'm like, okay, I'm going to put 30 down. And we'll go with that. You know, it's just like, but it's okay because we've been working together long enough. You know what I'm talking about too. we've been working together long enough that I just know that he's an optimistic and he's trying to please. And same thing with clients. It's like, you know, sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes I'm like, you know what, this client's gonna be really easy to work with. I know they're gonna send all their stuff right on time. I'm gonna give them that quote or even a little bit under because I know this will be submitted. There's a learning process that goes on with each client that you're working with and with each developer that you're working with that helps you adjust that.
Okay, and then was there a third thing there with the estimating?
I talked a little bit about agile development, software development. Like someone in this room, I guarantee, is more of an expert on this than I am, but it's the idea that you frame up at the beginning of a period of time, a sprint, say 2 weeks, here's all the things we think we're gonna get done. And instead of rating the tasks in hours, typically you'll rate them in points, often using like a Fibonacci scale or something to say this task is a 3, this one's a 7. And then you stack up you stack up your tasks that way, and then at the end of 2 weeks you do this kind of look back. Okay, we thought we could do 20 points worth of work, we actually only did 17, so now we know that where our estimating is kind of falling, and on the next 2 weeks 17 is about what we can expect to get done again. So you're learning from, because every project is different, every client is different, every team is different. You're learning from how fast does this team, when working on this problem, actually get stuff done, and let's adjust our estimates accordingly.
Okay. If I can just tell, and with Agile, you don't know all your requirements up front.
Right.
It's a building process of understanding.
Yeah.
And that's where you're breaking it down into the smallest tasks possible. Whenever you're doing agile-based stuff, it's like you don't want build so-and-so's website. You bring in build the homepage of the website, build the social integration. You break everything out as small as possible, and that way you can more easily assess how many points you can set.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know, for whatever reason, just like human nature, it's one of my questions for God actually, is like, why is it so hard to wrap our minds around these huge numbers? But after a certain point, it just gets hard to estimate.
I have a customer now that doesn't give me the information I need to finish the website. So what techniques do you do? How do you grab by the ears and just get their attention and get that done? This one's an MD. She's working six and a half days a week. And she's getting most of her business through referrals.
Sure.
She has to have a website.
Sure. So a couple thoughts, and you guys chime in if you have anything else. First of all, I'll send this to you, Jim, a really detailed upfront contract. So when I'm sitting down with the client, I have now like 19 things that I go over with them to say, look, during the course of the project, I guarantee you're going to get busy, and I just want you to know that the #1 thing that holds up client projects is you not getting back to me with feedback, and the #2 is you not giving me content. So 2 of the biggest things that hold up a project are on you. What's our plan for dealing with that? And what's going to happen when I'm going to come, just so you know, I'm going to come and push you on this a lot because it's what's going to hold up the project. So one is like setting that up for an expectation. As far as content writing, I have found that most clients say, oh, I'll provide all that to you, but it's kind of a recipe for disaster. And I would rather say, you know what, why don't we just bring in a copywriter? And I would rather subsidize that cost a little bit, even though I'm going to have to pay the copywriter a fair bit more. I say, let us come in and interview you. All you have to do is give us an hour of your time and just talk. We'll record the whole thing. I'll interview everything you say, and then our content writer will write all this, because that's a variable I can control versus your schedule I can't control. Right. And often, if you remind them, like, when was the last time you wrote an essay? It's hard. It's harder than it looks. Just let us do it for you. It's only going to be $500, subsidized number. But again, that just because that puts it in my control and my projects aren't getting derailed by a client who can give me back project, I found that it's worth that.
Just one real quick comment about content. Just because you can write does not mean that you can write well.
Absolutely.
Well,
it's an entirely different.
These are medical people.
And I saw some of what you had.
Yeah, and I would say, they're going to think, well, I'm the expert in what I do. No one else can write what I do. And you're like, yeah, that's probably right. It's probably fairly intricate, but let's interview you and at least give you a draft that you can then go back and review, rather than you having to sit in front of a blank page and literally write it.
If I can give you a real quick example of that, I am not a developer. but I work in IT, and we provided some instructions to one of the clients on how to do something. I thought it was very clear and very straightforward. They didn't have a clue. I mean, I gave them examples, screenshots. They didn't have a clue because it's still in language that I understand that they don't understand. And often when developers write things, that's exactly what happens. It's in your language, not the language of the people that are going to be.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I actually posted on the WordPress Phoenix Facebook page not too long ago. I'm continually trying to figure out how to bridge this gap. It's easy for us who build websites all the time to get frustrated when a client doesn't get information to us, and the client is sitting in their seat, and if they are like overwhelmed, like I use a word that they don't even know what it means because it's something in my vocabulary, but that just stumps them, and they're like overwhelmed. When you've got several things on your to-do list, are you going to tackle the one that's overwhelming, or are you going to do the one that you know how to do? The stuff that we're asking them to do is out of their comfort zone. And so I've been really thinking about how and the absolute best way is exactly, I think, what Dallin said, and is that hiring that content writer ourselves. We tend to work on websites that are a much smaller budget, and even a $500 is going to blow their budget completely out of the water. So I'm still searching for that. And Trudy, and I hadn't replied back on the Facebook post. I meant to, but I'll say it in person. But she wrote something about the visual. She's like, we as you're speaking your web language and we don't get it, but we need to figure out how to bridge that gap somewhere. And I don't have the answer. I've been thinking, is it a gravity form? Probably not. Is it some kind of nice laid out page that they can visualize? Oh, so that's what a meta description is.
Yeah.
Oh, so that's how. And so I'll stay tuned. I'll let you know in about 6 months whenever I've gone further down this path. But it's something I'm thinking about.
We would go out, install it on their computer, and then get the feedback, and then make changes accordingly.
From the